Hello, how is everyone doing? It is your fallen angel back with another video. Today, we are going over characteristics of basic ether particles. But before we get started, feel free to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's begin. Basic ether particle is called the Omni, which has a positive nucleus, or a protet called an Omnion, and a negative subelectron, or an electret, called an Omnitron. As you may have noticed, this scheme is a scaled down version of the basic hydrogen atom, with its proton and electron. Like most atoms, the Omni is normally neutral and in equilibrium, but is much smaller, being ultra fine. Due to its tiny size and neutrality, it can easily pass through solid bodies, except the solid bodies are actually passing by and through it, yet it behaves like a solid in respect to high-frequency electromagnetic radiation of specific range, from the infrared through the visible light frequencies, which disturb its equilibrium. Yet through, we can feel it. It appears to be transparent and invisible to the naked eye. So similarly, guys, we've talked about how neutrinos do the same thing in physics. They can pass through time-space, or what we know as ether. Like hydrogen gas, there is some elasticity due to the compressibility of the magnetic fields, so it is an elastic solid. As Faraday said, due to its tiny size, omni size, so-called empty space is actually packed almost solid with its very fine matter, which oscillates at such high frequencies well beyond the X-rays. Yet the tiny size and the normal neutrality allows it to penetrate solid mass, which is mostly space, which is also saturated with omni, which must be moved through by a mass to make room for more omni. Since interstellar space is equivalent to a vacuum containing little gaseous matter, such as a Leonard tube, in which changes or charges easily move, the omni in interstellar space is highly conductive, with charges moving freely from body to body along magnetic lines of force. Omnipack space is also omnidirectional, interpenetrated by ultrafine radiation, which is normally in equilibrium, called the zero-point radiation, or ZPR. This ZPR constantly twangs the electron clouds of atomic matter, creating the illusion of electron orbits, which are in fact standing waves in the indulating layers of the electronic clouds surrounding atoms and molecules. Since the matter with which these electron clouds are associated is in constant motion, the clouds are currents. Since a charge carried around is a current, the driving force behind the currents is the motion, which, so long as uniform, is force-free. Any lost momentum is made up of the ZPR. The Omni has an almost balanced charge to mass ratio, 1:1, and responds to both positive and negative impulses. Electrostatic generators provide a good example of the electrical behavior of the Omni. At a sufficiently high voltage, the positive and negative dynamic subcharges are separated by magnetic fields and condense to form electrons and protons. There is some unknown underlying reason why these charges are of specific magnitude, which is yet to be explained, but the quantum theory practically admits that there are subdivisions of basic electrical charges and that electrons are not indivisible. This is the basic bone of contention, since if electrons are divisible, relativism must fall. The basic charge, which has been perceived as that of the electron, appears to be time-related, since electrical currents moves at the same speed of light. Therefore, the electron charge is probably the quantity of charge accumulated from a discrete number of omni over some discrete unit of time, which reflects, in turn, the distance traveled through space of a proton during that time, with the charges actually circulating between the omni and matter. We could also understand the omni as a neutrino as well, traveling through time-space, or ether time-space. High voltage force, either is in electrical discharges or in radiation, is necessary to break the Omnion or Omnitron bond. The same principle applies to electropulsion. Strong high voltage, high frequency negative pulses are necessary to penetrate the negative omnitronic cloud barriers, to react with the positive omnions, to cause the inertia resistance of the omni to be asserted, so as to access its mass to be pulled against to propel a spaceship through omnipacked space using microhelical screwing force of rotating electromagnetic tubules around erosional vacuous omnicores. The tubules are the product of the rotation imparted by the magnetic flux to electrical currents, which are consolidated by changes in momentum. The great number of omni per volume of space represents a much greater density of positive matter than normal solid mass possesses. Hence, the omni functions as virtually stationary anchors, which an electropulsive craft can lock on to propel itself through space itself. The omni anchors are in fact dynamic relative to Earth, with a relative velocity of thousands of miles per hour, which represents the ultimate velocity of the Earth through the ether at any given time, since the accessing electropulsive force, when it in effect is transmitted at near the velocity of light. However, the comparative difference in velocity between the omni and the Earth is almost insignificant. It is practically as if the Earth is stationary relative to the ether, except for the effects of the so-called gravity. To an effect which travels at about 186,000 miles per second, a body traveling at about 20 miles per second is virtually at rest. The difference in density between liquid hydrogen and the omni, for example, is the relative to the difference in size between the hydrogen atom and the tiny omni, as well as the volume of space actually occupied by the omnion in relation to its omnitron. It can be assumed that a tiny omnion, being a subdivision of the proton, has much greater density per unit space due to the relative lack of space between the omni, which assembles to form protons. Much like the space between bricks is filled with motor. This motor is probably some of Tesla's insulative fluid, which wets positive bodies and particles as a perfect fluid. Just as the magnitude of the electron charge may be time relative, the magnitude of the proton may be likewise, being composed of a discrete number of omnions, accumulated over a discrete period of time. While the omni is invisible to the eye, because its period of vibration is beyond the visible frequencies, it is not imperceptible. As we move, we can feel the omni accelerating, decelerating, or changing directions within our bodies, because it is also omnidirectional. When running, we feel the resistance, inertia created within our body to changes in momentum, as the omnitubules are forced in different directions, or in accelerating or decelerating pathways through the atoms and molecules of our body. Once we reach a constant velocity, we can feel how the microhelices created by the constant pitch spins of the omnitrons bore through the omni, creating the momentum, which tends to carry us along in a level and straight lines. Once in constant velocity, we must supply only whatever energy is lost through wind and mechanical friction, or erratic movement, in order to maintain constant velocity. We can also see the effects of the omni in the behavior of everyday objects, the way they resist charges, changes in movement, fall, accelerate, gain, momentum, tumble, roll, collide, shatter, bounce, or come to rest. They correlate as solid mass to a flock of geese, maintaining its formation or shape as it flies through the air, which is also the omni. Here's an example of it. The Earth and everything on it is moving through ether-filled space at tremendous speed. In addition, the Earth spins and orbits, which gradually changes the microhelical patterns relative to the polarity of the interpenetrating etheric wind. The magnitude of the so-called force of gravity, measured from the center of the mass of a body, is greater at sea level than on top of Mount Everest, where the distance between its center and that of the Earth is greater. But this statement, based on Newton's law, fails to tell us why gravity exists, what forces create it, or why the force varies directly proportional to the masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the centers of the two bodies. Even Newton explicitly admitted that his laws fail to address causes and only claim to mathematically describe effects. Electrical content is inherent to all solid matter. Atoms contain nuclei composed of positive protons and neutral neutrons. Composed of protons and electrons around the nuclei are negative electrons. All matter which contains electrostatic charges and is in motion represent electrical charges carried around, hence currents, which create magnetic fields. Since magnetic fields impart rotation to electromagnetic fields, this creates rotary microhelical electromagnetic tubules within the bodies. Around irrotational vacuous ether cores, these tubules are aligned by the relative motion of a body along the axis of a uniform or changing movement and create momentum by boring through the ether. Since at any given time the pitch and the diameter of a microhelix is constant, it is not a vortex, which involves a logarithmic spiral, either inward or outward. Each time the velocity or direction changes, the microhelical pitch and orientation resists, then adjusts to the new momentum. The Earth has a minimum negative surface charge of approximately 20 ESU over CNR, 20 electrostatic units per square centimeter. This is an atmospheric phenomenon, due in part to ionizing effects of cosmic radiation, but cannot be explained without reference to the velocity of the Earth through the Omni. The relatively non-conductive, insulative, and dielectric properties of the atmospheric play a part. Beneath the Earth's surface charge, the semiconductive crust contains a vast ocean of surplus electrons. The Earth's surface charge is more or less a constant due to Earth's surface area, varying somewhat by altitude due to changes in atmospheric pressure and moisture content of the air, as well as the incidence of cosmic radiation and its frequencies. All atoms, including hydrogen, possess net positive charge. This is basic. The most basic positive charge of a proton exceeds the magnitude of the basic negative charge of an electron. Hydrogen, with its single proton and single electron, has its highest charge to mass ratio and the lowest gravity of all elements. As one moves up the periodic chart of elements, progressively increasing in complexity above hydrogen, elements possess progressively lower charge to mass ratios, since the comparative ratios of electrons match the number of only the protons in the nuclei. Since the neutrons are not negative, they add to the positive mass relative to the electron, but contribute nothing to electrical charge, and the ratio of neutrons increases up the chart. This leaves an excess positive mass of the Earth, the semiconductive surface of which is capable of receiving and maintaining a large negative charge surplus, mostly brought to Earth by the thousands of lightning bolts per second, and retained due to the dielectric and insulative properties of the atmosphere. The constant electrical discharges from the atmosphere are driven from the cosmic motion of the Earth, which converts the electrostatic charges to currents. This was confirmed by H.A. Rowland's experiment. Since atmospheric gases are insulators, the mostly alkaline, semiconductive crust of the Earth is largely an electron donor material, which maintains a large reservoir of negative charges insulated by the atmosphere. Cosmic rays striking from the rarefied light gases of the ionosphere maintain its positive charge. The effects of gravity also help, since helium and hydrogen, both light electropositive gases, gravitate to the ionized sphere. Between the ionosphere, 620 miles above of the Earth's surface, there is a gradient, 150 volts per meter, totaling about 176 million volts, creating a considerable electrical field. But the electric field extends far beyond the ionosphere. This electric field creates electrical displacement in the Omni within its reach, which is the cause of gravity. The effects of the electrical field on the Omni is almost instantaneous, since the near to the speed of light, as the Omni passes from free space into mass, where the gravitational force is exerted downward toward the source of the electrical field. There is no significant gravitational effect of Earth's field above the electric field. Since the Earth's magnetic field encompasses the moon, so does the electrical field when the subion, the Omni, is placed within an electrical field. The subnegative charge, the Omnitron, is attracted by the positive pole, or the ionosphere, and repelled by the negative pole, Earth. The effect of these attractive, repulsive forces is to displace each Omni and place the dielectric atmosphere and the Omni with a strain, so that near the Earth the omnitronic clouds around Omnion are forced eccentrically upward, while the neutral zone would be over 300 miles from the Earth. So guys, this was just a short introduction to the characteristics of basic ether particles and how they travel through time-space, as well as how they interact in the Earth. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below. I'd love to read them. Feel free to check us out on Patreon, Rumble, Twitter, Instagram, things of that nature. This has been your Fallen Angel, and I am out.